The vanishing of a vibrant young woman would ultimately validate the deepest apprehensions of her community. The discovery of her killer's history would ignite a wave of shock and outrage that would ripple through the quaint town of Bacchus Marsh and the entirety of Australia. Today, we dive into the compelling story of Sarah Cafferkey, a radiant young woman whose life was abruptly and tragically disrupted by a ruthless murderer, a man who should have been deprived of societal freedom from the start. So who exactly was Sarah Cafferkey? What chain of events transpired following her disappearance? And how did her killer manage to commit such a heinous act? Buckle up as we unravel her story. Our journey today whisks us off to the land down under, Australia. If there's one place I could chatter about ceaselessly, it would be Melbourne. This is purely subjective, but it might just be one of the most extraordinary cities on the globe. Crowned the world's most livable city for a 7-year streak from 2011 to 2017, and still holding its ground in the top 10 even in 2020. 1. Melbourne is a force to be reckoned with. Nestled in the southeastern quarter of mainland Australia, Melbourne stands proud as the capital of its state, Victoria. Its stunning skyline will grab your attention from afar, sprouting from its lush parks and the waters of Port Phillip. Once you find yourself immersed in the city, you'll discover its intertwining alleyways, home to bespoke boutiques, hidden cafes, and top-tier restaurants. Known for its cultural diversity, artistic flair, love for nature, and most notably, its coffee, Melbourne offers something for everyone. Now, let's transition 30 miles west of Melbourne's Cup to the small city of Bacchus Marsh. It was here that Sarah Cafferkey entered the world on June 20th, 1990, with her parents, Adrian Cafferkey and Noelle Dixon. Despite facing the heartache of her parents' separation at the tender age of 3, Sarah's childhood was primarily based in Bacchus Marsh, save for a brief stint in Queensland. Comedy Primary School was where she first showcased her brilliance and earned the reputation of being a model child. Nicknamed Sarah Bear by her loving mother, she was an intelligent, diligent, and highly creative child. She brimmed with joy, adored Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and even dabbled in modeling during her teen years. At 15, Sarah was diagnosed with asthma, which gradually worsened in the 10th and 11th grades, leading to frequent hospitalizations. By 12th grade, she had to be homeschooled as her condition prevented her from attending Bacchus Marsh College. However, this did not dampen her spirits. At 16, she began experimenting with alcohol and marijuana, and unfortunately, ecstasy followed soon after. Regardless of these challenges, she held on to her dream of becoming a lawyer and contributing to the justice system. As Sarah transitioned into adulthood, her compassionate nature remained intact. She was a beacon of kindness, always ready to lend a helping hand, and her love for animals was unmatched. Her furry companion, Sprocket, was among her closest friends. Nonetheless, life started to get significantly more challenging for Sarah around mid-2011 for a myriad of reasons. Despite previous successful counseling sessions, her struggles with addiction re-emerged. In September of that year, she entered a tumultuous relationship with a man named Christopher. Their relationship was a roller coaster ride, filled with intense arguments, breakups, and reconciliations. After enduring this cycle for over a year, Sarah decided she had had enough. The strain of the relationship drove her further into the clutches of her addiction, exacerbating her struggles and bad habits. However, Sarah was not one to give up easily. Recognizing the destructive pattern she was in, she courageously checked herself into a detox facility, hoping to break free from her vicious cycle. While navigating this challenging phase, she documented her experiences in a diary, providing a poignant insight into her battle. Wow, so here I am in detox. It's hard to fathom how I got to this point. I guess that's the trouble with addiction, when you can say no, you don't want to, and when you want to. And when you want to say no, you can't. I can't imagine the heartache of my friends and family who have had no choice but to sit back and watch. me destroy everything they've helped me create. I cannot describe the sorrow I feel for hurting those I love. I will beat this. Drugs will no longer drive my life, or could my perspective. I need to and will take responsibility of my actions. I will push myself and strive to be the amazing, grounded, generous, selfless I can be. I want to fix my wrongs. I want responsibility. Sarah managed to conquer the program and emerge back into the normal world. Regrettably, it didn't have the enduring impact she had hoped for. Falling back into the clutches of drug use was a harsh reality, with Chris perpetually aggravating the situation. Chris, a textbook definition of a toxic individual, was disgruntled in his relationship, but instead of seeking to resolve the problem, he took pleasure in emotionally tormenting Sarah. His actions escalated to an alarming level in late September 2012, when he sent his friend to stalk and intimidate Sarah at her workplace, following another breakup. Externally, Sarah maintained her composure, a trait she was known for. But inside, she was shattering. Despite her reputation for kindness and generosity, the past few months have been an uphill battle. Her slip back into drug use was an unfortunate accident, and yet she found herself caught in the vicious cycle once again. She was just as much a victim of the drugs as she was of Chris. In November 2012, a meeting with her boss delivered a harsh blow. Her recent inconsistency at work had resulted in the termination of her contract. However, it wasn't completely bleak. She was given the chance to resume her role once she managed to, as they said, get her life back together. Despite the initial disappointment, Sarah seized this as a golden opportunity to reevaluate her life and kick some pesky habits to the curb. With a break from the daily grind and a good dose of self-care, she's all set to bounce back stronger and better than ever. In her diary, she once wrote the following: I aspire to be the generous, caring person I once was. I respect all the amazing people in my life, and I need to show them that. My actions will speak louder than my words, positively as opposed to the past. I will change. I will be me again. I will love again, myself and life. Brimming with determination, Sarah was hell-bent on steering her life back towards stability. She decided to check herself back into a detox facility on November 13th, 2012, banking on the success she'd had there before. With only a handful of days before her rehabilitation stint, she figured she could use some downtime with friends. She wasn't thinking hard drugs, just a couple of beers for old time's sake. On the afternoon of November 10th, 2012, the surveillance camera at Foodworks, a local supermarket in Bacchus Marsh, spotted Sarah striding out with some alcohol in her bag. She had just pinged a recent acquaintance, inviting him over for a drink and perhaps to sample something stronger at his place nearby. She appeared content, and despite her personal struggles, nothing seemed amiss to her family or friends. But after being spotted on this camera and exiting Foodworks, Sarah went off the grid. Her mother, who tried to reach out to her later that day, was met with silence. She was already fraught with worry for Sarah. Just the day prior, Sarah had visited Chris's house in an attempt to rekindle their relationship, which understandably put her mother, Noelle, on high alert. Thankfully, the visit had been drama-free, but Noelle's worry shifted to this new friend Sarah was spending time with. She expressed her concern in a text to Sarah, who assured her, if anything happens, Ali knows where he is and where he lives. Incredibly, Sarah's final correspondence with her mother was this message. She didn't respond to any subsequent texts that afternoon, nor at night, or even the day after. The clock ticked to the 12th of November, 2 days before her mysterious disappearance, when Noelle Allel took the grave step of reporting Sarah as missing to the authorities. As the calendar flipped to the 14th of November, the police made a desperate public appeal, seeking any information on Sarah's location. Interestingly, in the tight-knit community of Bacchus Marsh, the local folks had already initiated their search for her.
There's growing concern for a 22-year-old Bacchus Marsh woman who's been missing for almost a week. Sarah Cafferkey was last seen by her family on Friday night before heading out with friends and has a condition requiring medication. Sarah has fair complexion, black shoulder-length straight hair with green eyes. Her silver Astra sedan is also missing.
Despite her battle with asthma, Sarah's friends and family were deeply worried about her well-being. Unfortunately, their fears seemed to be justified when no trace of Sarah was found at any of the searched locations. The first significant lead surfaced on November 15th when surveillance footage from FoodWorks revealed her car, a sleek silver 2001 Astra sedan, parked near a residence on Owen Street in Maribyrnong. However, this lead turned out to be a dead end. There were no indications of foul play or interference, and the homeowner was utterly clueless about the situation. 6 days into Sarah's mysterious disappearance, a chilling discovery was made. In the wee hours, police cordoned off a property in Point Cook, located about 15 miles southeast of Bacchus Marsh. Armed with a tip-off and a search warrant, they embarked on a daunting exploration of the property. The stench of decay led them to a green wheelie bin in the garage, ominously filled with concrete. As they waited for a CT scan of the bin, grim evidence began to surface. Bloodstains were found on the floor and a nearby stepladder, accompanied by empty bags of quickset concrete and a container of lime, often used to dissolve biological matter. The ensuing CT scan confirmed the investigators' worst fears. Encased in the concrete was a human body, tragically identified as Sarah Cafferkey. Concurrently, a house in Bacchus Marsh was being searched, revealing signs of a violent assault. Illuminated by UV light, bloodstains were found scattered across the kitchen. In just one morning, the investigators had pieced together a horrifying narrative of what likely happened to Sarah, the location of the attack, and where her body was discarded. But with 2 crime scenes now linked to Sarah, what were the precise circumstances of her demise? And who bore the guilt of her murder? Do you recall the friend I mentioned earlier? The one enlisted by Sarah's intimidating boyfriend to terrorize her at work. That man was Stephen James Hunter, born on October 6, 1965, quite a bit older than Sarah. Residing in Bacchus Marsh at the time, he wasn't exactly flourishing in life. When asked by Chris to scare Sarah, Stephen was instead drawn to her. Choosing honesty, he confessed his original intent to Sarah and swore to protect her from Chris. Their relationship quickly evolved into a friendship, with Stephen even offering her a place to stay and introducing her to crystal methamphetamine, or ices. As you might have guessed, the new friend Sarah was planning to meet on November 10th was indeed Stephen. When the dots were finally connected between Sarah and Stephen, a sense of unease swept over the authorities. Stephen James Hunter was not just any man. He was a convict, a man who had previously danced with the devil himself. His criminal record was as dark as it gets, with a murder conviction to his name. Rewind to 1986, when a fresh-faced 21-year-old Stephen worked at a supermarket in Gladstone Park, northwest of Melbourne. Here, he crossed paths with the young and vibrant Jacqueline Matthews. Over time, he developed feelings for her, but Jacqueline was far from reciprocating. She was more than just disinterested. She was repulsed by him. But Stephen, already a partner and a father, wasn't the type to take no for an answer. One fateful afternoon, he made advances towards Jacqueline while driving her home. She rejected him outright, but in response, he launched a vicious attack. He stabbed her repeatedly in the chest, abdomen, and throat. This brutal assault ended Jacqueline's life prematurely. Stephen then tried to erase his heinous act. He doused Jacqueline's car in kerosene, staged an accident, and set it ablaze. But justice has a way of catching up. Clues led the authorities to Stephen, and in 1986 he was sentenced to 16 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 13 years. But Stephen was a hard man to reform. In 1990, he escaped prison but was quickly recaptured. In 2000, he was released after serving just 13 years for murder and attempted escape. His parole, however, was short-lived. In 2002, He was back behind bars for failing a drug test and committing an unlawful assault. Then, in an astonishing turn of events, Stephen was released on parole just 3 months later. You might think he would have played it safe, but no. Stephen seemed to have a relentless attraction to trouble. In 2004, he was back in prison for a range of offenses, including drug trafficking, stalking, kidnapping, and intentionally causing injury. After 6.5 tumultuous years, Stephen was released on parole in 2011, thanks to good behavior. Miraculously, he managed to stay out of trouble until he completed his parole on 30th October 2012, just 11 days before Sarah disappeared. Sarah Cafferkey was blissfully unaware that the man she was spending time with, Stephen Hunter, was a previously convicted murderer, stalker, and kidnapper. Tragically, his dark past remained hidden from her, under wraps by both Stephen and his accomplice, Chris. On the ill-fated day, Sarah vanished. She was planning to meet up with Stephen, who was dividing his time between 2 properties in Bacchus Marsh and Point Cook. These were the very same properties that were later raided on November 17th. Sarah's post-mortem examination painted a gruesome picture. She had been stabbed multiple times, sustaining injuries to her aorta, left carotid artery, lungs, liver, and skull. In total, she had been stabbed 17 times and was also brutally bludgeoned with a hammer. What was Stephen's motive for this horrific attack? He was unable to cope with Sarah's rejection when she refused to become intimate with him, a situation eerily reminiscent of Jacqueline's plight. After the murder, Stephen fled the scene, leaving Sarah's lifeless body on his kitchen floor while he casually mingled with friends. The day after, he cold-heartedly returned, moved her body into the trunk of his car, and drove to a Bunnings hardware store in Port Melbourne. There, he purchased a 20-liter container of hydrochloric acid, 3 bags of rapid-set concrete, 1 bag of lime agent, and a roll of black plastic. Sarah was eventually transported to Stephen's Point Cook property, where her body was deposited in a wheelie bin and entombed in rapid-set concrete. Cunningly, he moved her car to Owen Street to mislead the police and refrained from using his mobile phone to avoid detection. However, Stephen's name surfaced through Ali and his own Facebook post to Sarah, leading to his quick arrest. Initially, he managed to evade the police by hiding in the nearby suburb of Hawthorne, but he was ultimately located, arrested, and charged with Sarah's murder on November 20th. Stephen was set to face the jury, but before his trial could commence, he pleaded guilty to Sarah's murder, effectively sealing his fate. In August 2013, he was unsurprisingly found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In the end, after a second murder and his 4th stint in prison, Stephen Hunter is now destined to spend the rest of his life behind bars. But as the story of Stephen Hunter and Sarah Cafferkey came to a close, questions around the details of this case began to manifest. In the wake of these inquiries, all eyes gradually shifted to the Australian legal system. The burning question was, how did Sarah Cafferkey's murder come to pass? However, a retrospective glance at Stephen's history makes it baffling to believe he was allowed to roam Melbourne streets freely. I'm aware this is a repeating point, but let me underscore again. Stephen was a ruthless murderer back in 1986. He attempted to obscure his involvement, only to be apprehended, and even made an escape attempt from prison. Upon his release in 2000, he found himself back behind bars twice more, once for assaulting another man, and then for drug trafficking, stalking, and kidnapping offenses. He was a habitual offender who never mended his ways. While there was no concrete evidence to predict his second murder, the risk was recklessly taken with another innocent woman's life. It warrants noting that Stephen's upbringing was nothing short of tragic, riddled with physical abuse, neglect, substance misuse, and relentless exposure to domestic violence. As a child, he suffered the cruel punishment of being seared with an iron for bed, wetting. At the tender age of 8, he bore witness to his father threatening his mother with a shotgun. The trigger was mercifully never pulled, But the horrifying memory undoubtedly scarred Stephen deeply. While this doesn't pardon his actions, it offers a glimpse into the psychological impact of his traumatic childhood. Regrettably, due to this man's unforgivable actions, Jacqueline Matthews and Sarah Cafferkey's lives were abruptly stolen. Sarah, in her final months, grappled with personal challenges. As health issues emerged in her late teens, she briefly sought solace in drugs to numb her pain, a decision that tragically spiraled into a prolonged battle with addiction. Despite her struggles, Sarah was a kind-hearted, generous soul, full of ambition and hope to make her loved ones proud. Yet before she had a chance to rectify her mistakes, she fell prey to a seemingly trustworthy new friend, who was, unbeknownst to her, a seasoned killer. In the aftermath of Stephen Hunter's life sentence, the government announced considerable changes to the parole system since Sarah's untimely death. However, it remains unclear whether these changes could have averted the tragedy. This suggests there's more work to be done in refining the parole system to protect society better. There's little about Australia that leaves me disappointed. But this story, it's a massive letdown. Since 2012, Sarah's mother, Noelle, has dedicated herself to safeguarding others from violent criminals, sharing her daughter's story in hopes of preventing such a dreadful incident from recurring. Even in Sarah's absence, Noelle continues to care for Sprocket, making a silver lining in this dark cloud.